The morning sun cast a golden glow over Kensington Palace as Catherine Wales stood before her bedroom mirror, carefully adjusting the delicate pearl earrings that had once belonged to her late mother-in-law, Princess Diana. The weight of the day ahead pressed gently on her shoulders, not with burden but with purpose. Today was no ordinary day. It was the coronation, a moment that would etch itself into the pages of British history forever. In the adjoining room, she could hear the gentle chaos of her children preparing for what would undoubtedly be one of the most significant days of their young lives. Prince George, now 10 years old, was practicing his posture in front of his own mirror, remembering the countless etiquette lessons that had prepared him for this moment. His younger sister, Princess Charlotte, 8 years old and full of spirited energy, was spinning in her specially designed dress, watching the fabric flow like water around her small frame. The youngest of the Wales children, Prince Louis, barely 5 years old, was less concerned with the grandeur of the occasion and more fascinated by the shiny buttons on his ceremonial outfit. His innocent laughter echoed through the palace corridors, a sound that brought smiles to the faces of the staff members who had watched these children grow from tiny infants into young royals with distinct personalities and natural charm. William Wales moved through the palace with measured steps, his mind focused on the day's proceedings. As the heir apparent, he understood the significance of this coronation better than most. This was not merely a ceremony. It was the formal beginning of his father's reign and a pivotal moment for the monarchy's future. The responsibility he felt was immense, not just for himself but for his entire family, who would stand beside him throughout the day. The palace buzzed with quiet efficiency as staff members made final preparations. Catherine's lady-in-waiting carefully pressed the stunning blue dress that had been chosen months earlier, each detail scrutinized and approved by royal protocol officers. The color had been selected not just for its beauty but for its symbolism, a shade that honored British tradition while reflecting Catherine's own refined taste and modern sensibility. Meanwhile, the children's outfits hung in perfect order, each piece representing hours of careful planning and consideration. The designers had worked tirelessly to create clothing that would be both appropriate for such a solemn occasion and comfortable enough for children to wear throughout the lengthy ceremony. Every button, every fold, every accessory had been chosen with care. As the family gathered in the morning room for a light breakfast, the atmosphere was a unique blend of excitement and reverence. They understood they were about to participate in a ceremony that connected them to centuries of British history. King Charles had dreamed of this day for decades, and now his family would stand as witnesses to his formal ascension to the throne. Catherine looked at her children with pride and a touch of maternal concern. She knew the day would be long and demanding, especially for Louis, who was still so young. She had spent weeks preparing them, explaining the importance of the ceremony, practicing how to sit still during long speeches, and helping them understand their roles in this historic moment. George, as second in line to the throne, carried a special weight of responsibility, while Charlotte and Louis would need to navigate the day with grace beyond their years. The breakfast conversation was light but purposeful. William discussed the day's schedule with Catherine, ensuring they were both clear on timing and protocol. The children asked questions about what they would see and do, their curiosity mixed with the natural nervousness that comes with such a significant public appearance. Outside the palace walls, London was already stirring with anticipation. Thousands of people had traveled from across the United Kingdom and around the world to witness this historic event. The streets leading to Westminster Abbey were lined with barriers, and security personnel were conducting their final checks. The entire city seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the ceremony that would officially crown King Charles III. As the morning progressed, the Wales family's preparation became more focused and deliberate. Hair and makeup artists arrived to ensure everyone looked perfect for the cameras that would capture every moment of their arrival and participation in the ceremony. Catherine's hair was styled in an elegant updo that would complement her headpiece, while the children's hair was arranged to look neat and appropriate for such a formal occasion. The final touches were being added to their outfits when a gentle knock came at the door. A palace aide announced that their transportation would be ready soon, and it was time for the family to make their way to the vehicles that would carry them to Westminster Abbey. The moment they had been preparing for was finally at hand, as they gathered in the palace's grand entrance hall. The Wales family stood together, each member representing a different generation of the monarchy. William, tall and dignified, embodied the future of the crown. Catherine, graceful and poised, represented the modern face of royalty. And their three children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, symbolized hope, continuity, and the promise of the monarchy's enduring legacy. The palace doors opened, and they could hear the distant sounds of the crowds already gathering along their route to Westminster Abbey. In just a few moments, they would step into their cars and begin the journey that would take them to one of the most important ceremonies in British history. The coronation of King Charles III was about to begin, and the Wales family was ready to play their part in this momentous occasion. The weight of history, tradition, and the future of the monarchy rested gently on their shoulders as they prepared to step into the bright morning light and begin their journey to Westminster Abbey, where they would witness the formal beginning of a new chapter in the story of the British royal family. The sleek black vehicles pulled away from Kensington Palace with quiet dignity, beginning the journey that would transform an ordinary London morning into a historic moment. Catherine Wales sat beside her husband, her hands folded gracefully in her lap, occasionally glancing at her children to ensure they were comfortable and ready for what lay ahead. The drive through London streets would take them past thousands of well-wishers who had gathered since dawn, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal family on this extraordinary day. Prince George sat up straight in his seat, his eyes wide as he watched the crowds gathering along the route. Even at his young age, he understood the significance of this day and the role his family played in British history. His grandfather was about to become king, and George himself was second in line to inherit the throne that had been passed down through generations of his family. The responsibility was immense, but today he simply focused on being present for this historic moment. Princess Charlotte pressed her face to the window, waving at the people who had come to see them pass. Her natural warmth and genuine joy at seeing so many friendly faces brought smiles to those lucky enough to catch sight of her. She had inherited her mother's grace and her father's sense of duty, even at her young age, and she seemed to understand instinctively how to connect with the people who had gathered to share in this celebration. Prince Louis, the youngest member of the family, was fascinated by all the pageantry surrounding their journey. The ceremonial decorations, the uniforms of the guards, and the sheer number of people lining the streets captured his attention completely. His parents had spent time preparing him for this day, explaining that it was very important and that many people would be watching, but for Louis, it was an adventure unlike anything he had ever experienced. As their convoy moved through the heart of London, the Wales family could see the city had been transformed for the coronation. British flags hung from every building, and ceremonial banners marked their route to Westminster Abbey. The historic streets, usually bustling with regular traffic and everyday activities, had been cleared and decorated to create a pathway fit for royal procession. It was as if the entire city had dressed in its finest clothes to welcome the new king. William Wales watched the crowds with a mixture of pride and humility. These were his future subjects, people who had chosen to spend their day celebrating the monarchy and the continuity it represented. He could see families who had traveled great distances, elderly people who remembered previous royal ceremonies, and young children experiencing their first royal event. The diversity of the crowd reflected the modern Britain that his father would now lead as king. The children's excitement was carefully balanced with the proper behavior they had been taught for such occasions. George sat with the dignified posture expected of a future king, while Charlotte waved appropriately at the crowds, and Louis simply took in all the sights and sounds with wonder. Catherine occasionally whispered gentle reminders about protocol, but her children had been well prepared and seemed to understand the importance of their role in this historic day. As they approached Westminster Abbey, the ancient building came into view, its Gothic towers reaching toward the sky like fingers, pointing to heaven. The Abbey had witnessed centuries of royal ceremonies, from coronations to weddings to funerals, and today it would once again serve as the backdrop for a moment that would be remembered for generations to come. The sight of the historic building sent a thrill through the Wales family, knowing they were about to enter a place where British history had been made for nearly 1,000 years. The crowds grew thicker as they neared their destination, with people packed, shoulder to shoulder, along the barriers that lined the streets. Security personnel maintained careful watch, but the atmosphere was celebratory rather than tense. This was a day of joy and ceremony, a moment when the nation came together to witness the formal beginning of King Charles III's reign. Inside their vehicle, the Wales family made final preparations for their arrival. Catherine checked her children's appearance one last time, smoothing Charlotte's hair and adjusting Louis's collar. William reviewed the day's schedule in his mind, ensuring he remembered all the important moments and protocols they would need to follow. The children sat quietly, understanding that they were approaching the most important part of their day. The convoy began to slow as they reached the final approach to Westminster Abbey. Through the windows, they could see the magnificent facade of the ancient church, decorated with ceremonial bunting and surrounded by the carefully orchestrated pageantry that marked such a significant royal occasion. Hundreds of guests were already seated inside, including heads of state from around the world, members of parliament, representatives from the Commonwealth nations, and other dignitaries who had traveled to London to witness this historic moment. As their vehicles came to a complete stop outside Westminster Abbey, the Wales family could hear the sounds of the ceremony preparation echoing from within the ancient walls. The organ was being tested, choirs were practicing their final notes, and the ceremonial officials were making their last-minute arrangements. In just a few moments, they would step out of their cars and walk into the Abbey, where they would take their places as witnesses to the coronation of King Charles III. The car doors would soon open, and the Wales family would emerge to face the cameras, the crowds, and the weight of history. They had prepared for this moment for months, understanding their role in the ceremony and the importance of their presence at this pivotal moment in British royal history. The coronation was about to begin, and they were ready to play their part in this ancient tradition that connected them to centuries of British monarchs who had come before them. The anticipation was palpable as they sat in their vehicles, just moments away from stepping into Westminster Abbey and into the pages of history. The car doors opened with ceremonial precision, and the Wales family stepped onto the red carpet that had been laid out before Westminster Abbey. The moment their feet touched the ground, thousands of camera shutters clicked in unison, capturing every detail of their arrival for history books and newspapers around the world. Catherine Wales emerged first, her elegant blue dress flowing gracefully as she moved, the color catching the morning light in a way that seemed almost ethereal. William Wales followed, his tall frame commanding attention as he stepped beside his wife. He wore the ceremonial dress uniform befitting his position as heir to the throne, each medal and decoration telling a story of service and dedication to the crown and country. Together they presented a picture of modern royalty, dignified, approachable, and perfectly prepared for the historic moment they were about to witness. The children emerged from their vehicle with careful steps, each one aware that they were being watched by millions of people around the world. Prince George walked with the measured gait he had practiced countless times, his young shoulders carrying the invisible weight of his future destiny as a king in waiting. His composure was remarkable for a 10-year-old, showing the careful training and natural dignity that would serve him well throughout his life. Princess Charlotte stepped onto the red carpet with natural grace, her dress perfectly arranged, and her smile genuine as she looked around at the magnificent scene before them. Even at 8 years old, she seemed to understand the significance of the moment, and her presence added a touch of youthful joy to the solemn occasion. Her wave to the cameras was neither too enthusiastic nor too reserved, perfectly calibrated for a young princess who was learning to navigate public life. Prince Louis, the youngest member of the family, looked around with wide eyes at all the pageantry surrounding him. The sight of Westminster Abbey decorated for the coronation, the guards in their ceremonial uniforms, and the crowds of people created a spectacle that captured his imagination completely. His parents kept a gentle watch over him, knowing that the long day ahead would be challenging for such a young child. As the Wales family walked toward the entrance of Westminster Abbey, they could hear the magnificent organ music echoing from within the ancient walls. The sound seemed to vibrate through the very stones of the building, creating an atmosphere of reverence and grandeur that befitted such a historic occasion. Each step they took brought them closer to witnessing a ceremony that had been centuries in the making. The Abbey's great west door stood open before them, revealing glimpses of the incredible scene inside. Hundreds of guests were already seated in carefully arranged rows, their formal attire creating a sea of elegant colors against the ancient stone architecture. The altar had been prepared with all the ceremonial objects that would be used in the coronation, including the crown that would soon rest upon King Charles's head. Catherine Wales paused for a moment at the threshold of the Abbey, taking in the magnitude of what they were about to witness. She had attended many royal ceremonies before, but this was different. This was the coronation of her father-in-law, the moment when he would formally accept the role he had been preparing for his entire life. She felt the weight of history and the responsibility that came with being part of the royal family. The children walked closely together as they approached the entrance, their training in royal protocol evident in their careful movements and respectful demeanor. They had been taught to show proper reverence for sacred spaces and important ceremonies, and Westminster Abbey certainly qualified as both. The ancient building had witnessed the coronations of monarchs for nearly 1,000 years, and today, it would add King Charles III to that illustrious list. Inside the Abbey, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The assembled guests represented a cross-section of British society and international dignitaries, all gathered to witness this historic moment. Members of Parliament sat alongside representatives from Commonwealth nations, while religious leaders prepared to participate in the sacred ceremony that would officially install King Charles as the head of the Church of England and the constitutional monarch of the United Kingdom. As the Wales family entered Westminster Abbey, they were immediately struck by the incredible beauty of the space. The Gothic architecture soared above them, creating a sense of awe and reverence that had inspired visitors for centuries. The stained glass windows cast colorful patterns of light across the stone floors, while the ornate decorations prepared, especially for the coronation, added layers of gold and royal blue to the already magnificent interior. Their footsteps echoed softly on the ancient stones as they made their way to their designated seats near the front of the Abbey. These were places of honor, reserved for the immediate family of the king, and they carried with them the responsibility to represent the future of the monarchy. William Wales would soon be next in line for the throne, and his children would follow after him, creating an unbroken chain of succession that stretched back through centuries of British history. The Wales family took their seats with quiet dignity, each member understanding the solemnity of the occasion, while also feeling the excitement of witnessing something truly historic. They could see the altar where the coronation ceremony would take place, surrounded by the ancient symbols of royal power and religious authority that had been used in such ceremonies for generations. As they settled into their seats, Catherine Wales helped ensure the children were comfortable and reminded them quietly about the proper behavior expected during the long ceremony ahead. Prince George sat up straight, fully aware of the cameras that would occasionally focus on the royal family throughout the service. Princess Charlotte arranged her dress carefully and looked around at the incredible scene unfolding before them. Prince Louis tried to take in all the sights and sounds, occasionally whispering questions that his mother answered in hushed tones. The moment they had been preparing for was finally at hand. King Charles III would soon make his entrance into Westminster Abbey, beginning the ceremony that would formally crown him as monarch and mark the beginning of a new era in British royal history. The Wales family was ready to witness this historic moment, their presence adding to the significance of an occasion that would be remembered for generations to come. A profound silence fell over Westminster Abbey as the great organ began playing the processional music that would accompany King Charles III's entrance. The Wales family, seated in their places of honor, felt the collective intake of breath from the thousands of people gathered inside the ancient church. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the arrival of the man who would be crowned king before their eyes. Catherine Wales gently placed her hand on Prince Louis's shoulder, feeling him tense with excitement as the ceremonial procession began to move down the Abbey's central aisle. The young prince had never experienced anything quite like this before, and she wanted to ensure he felt secure and supported throughout the lengthy ceremony that was about to unfold. Her maternal instincts were heightened by the formal nature of the occasion, and the knowledge that her children's behavior would be observed by millions of people around the world. Prince George watched with intense focus as his grandfather approached, carried along by centuries of tradition and protocol. The boy understood that he was witnessing something extraordinary, not just the coronation of King Charles III, but a moment that connected him directly to his own future destiny. One day, he would walk down this same aisle, surrounded by the same ancient ceremonies, preparing to accept the crown that was about to be placed on his grandfather's head. The procession moved with measured dignity, each participant playing their role in a ceremony that had been refined and perfected over hundreds of years. The Archbishop of Canterbury led the religious officials, followed by representatives from various orders and institutions that formed part of the complex tapestry of British constitutional monarchy. The regalia, including the crown, scepters, and orb, were carried with reverent care by designated officials who understood the sacred nature of these ancient symbols. Princess Charlotte watched everything with wide eyes, occasionally whispering questions to her mother about the various elements of the ceremony. Why did some people wear different colored robes? What were those golden objects being carried so carefully? Catherine Wales answered each question in hushed tones, helping her daughter understand the religious and historical significance of what they were witnessing together. As King Charles III came into view, walking with slow and deliberate steps toward the altar, the Wales family felt a surge of pride and emotion. This was William's father, the children's grandfather, but today he was also their king. The transformation from family patriarch to constitutional monarch was taking place before their eyes, marked by ceremonies that stretched back to the earliest days of English royalty. The Abbey's magnificent architecture seemed to embrace the ceremony, with every arch and column bearing witness to this historic moment. The stained glass windows cast patterns of colored light that danced across the faces of the assembled guests, while the ancient stones themselves seemed to vibrate with the weight of history being made. Westminster Abbey had seen many coronations, but each one was unique, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the continuing story of the British monarchy. William Wales watched his father approach the altar with deep emotion. He had spent his entire life preparing for the day when he would inherit the throne. But first he wanted to see his father succeed in the role he had waited decades to fulfill. King Charles had been heir to the throne longer than any person in British history, and this moment represented the culmination of a lifetime of preparation and dedication to duty. The ceremonial music swelled as King Charles III reached his position before the altar, surrounded by the religious and constitutional officials who would conduct the coronation ceremony. The weight of the moment was palpable, felt not just by the royal family but by every person present in Westminster Abbey, and the millions more watching around the world through television and other media. The Archbishop of Canterbury began speaking, the ancient words that would guide the ceremony, his voice carrying clearly throughout the Abbey despite its vast size. These were words that had been spoken at coronations for centuries, connecting King Charles III to an unbroken line of monarchs who had accepted the same sacred responsibilities and made the same solemn promises to serve their people with dedication and integrity. Prince Louis fidgeted slightly in his seat, the length and formality of the ceremony beginning to challenge his 5-year-old attention span. Catherine Wales gently adjusted his position and whispered encouraging words, helping him understand that this was a very special day that required patience and good behavior. The young prince nodded seriously, clearly wanting to do his part in supporting his grandfather on this important day. The ceremony continued with ancient rituals that had been carefully preserved and passed down through generations. Each element had deep meaning, from the religious blessings to the presentation of the regalia, and the Wales family watched with reverent attention as these traditions played out before them. They were not merely observers but participants in a moment that would define the next era of British royal history. As the most sacred moments of the ceremony approached, the Wales family joined the rest of the assembled guests in maintaining absolute silence and respect. The crown was being prepared for placement on King Charles III's head, the moment when he would officially become king in the eyes of both God and the nation. This was the culmination of everything they had come to witness, the moment that would be remembered and talked about for generations to come. The anticipation in Westminster Abbey was almost overwhelming as everyone present understood they were about to witness history being made. The Wales family, representing the future of the monarchy, sat ready to support King Charles III as he accepted the crown and the enormous responsibilities that came with it. The ceremony was reaching its climax, and they were honored to be present for this extraordinary moment in British royal history. The ancient words continued to echo through the Abbey as the coronation moved toward its most significant moment, with the Wales family serving as witnesses to the formal beginning of King Charles III's reign. The moment everyone had been waiting for arrived with breathtaking solemnity, as the Archbishop of Canterbury lifted St. Edward's crown high above King Charles III's bowed head. The Wales family, along with everyone else in Westminster Abbey, held their breath as centuries of tradition culminated in this single historic moment. The golden crown, adorned with precious gems and carrying the weight of 1,000 years of British history, seemed to glow in the filtered light streaming through the Abbey's ancient stained glass windows. Catherine Wales felt tears gathering in her eyes as she watched her father-in-law prepare to receive the crown that would transform him from heir to king. She had known Charles for years as a devoted father and grandfather, a man who had dedicated his life to charitable causes and environmental protection. Now she was witnessing his transformation into King Charles III, the constitutional monarch who would lead the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth nations into a new era. Prince George sat absolutely still, understanding that he was witnessing the most important moment of the entire ceremony. His young mind grasped the significance of what was happening. His grandfather was becoming king, which meant his father would now be next in line for the throne, and eventually, the crown would pass to him. The weight of that future responsibility felt both thrilling and overwhelming for a 10-year-old boy, but he was determined to watch every detail of this historic moment. As the Archbishop lowered the crown onto King Charles's head, Westminster Abbey erupted in a thunderous chorus of "God Save the King." The Wales family joined their voices with the hundreds of others present, their words echoing off the ancient stone walls and rising toward the Gothic vaulting above. Princess Charlotte sang with enthusiasm, her clear young voice adding to the joyful celebration of the new king's coronation. The moment the crown touched King Charles's head, Prince Louis's eyes went wide with wonder. Despite his young age, he seemed to understand that something very important had just happened to his grandfather. The formal ceremony, the beautiful music, and the excitement of all the adults around him combined to create an atmosphere of magic and importance that even a 5-year-old could appreciate. William Wales felt a complex mixture of emotions as he watched his father officially become king. Pride dominated his feelings, knowing how hard his father had worked and how long he had waited for this moment. But he also felt the weight of his own changing position. He was now the heir apparent to the throne, first in line to inherit the crown that had just been placed on his father's head. His life had changed in this moment, even though he had been preparing for it his entire life. The ceremony continued with the presentation of the other symbols of royal authority, the scepters, the orb, and the ring that represented the monarch's marriage to the nation. Each item was presented with ancient words and rituals that had been carefully preserved through centuries of British royal tradition. The Wales family watched with deep respect as these sacred objects were placed in King Charles's hands, marking his acceptance of the responsibilities that came with the crown. The newly crowned King Charles III rose from his throne, the crown secure on his head and the regalia held firmly in his hands. The transformation was complete. He was no longer simply the heir to the throne but the king of the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and the other Commonwealth realms. The Wales family, along with everyone else present, witnessed the exact moment when one era ended and another began. The religious portion of the ceremony concluded with magnificent choral music that filled Westminster Abbey with sound so beautiful it seemed to lift the spirits of everyone present. The Wales family listened with deep appreciation, knowing that this music would forever be associated with the coronation of King Charles III and the moment when their family's destiny shifted once again. As the formal ceremony drew toward its conclusion, the Wales family prepared to join the recessional procession that would escort the newly crowned king out of Westminster Abbey and toward his coronation carriage. They understood that their role in the day's events was far from over. They would soon be part of the magnificent procession through London that would allow thousands of people to see their new king and celebrate this historic day. Catherine. Wales helped her children prepare to stand and join the procession, making sure their ceremonial clothing was properly arranged, and reminding them about the protocols they would need to follow as they walked through Westminster Abbey and out into the London streets. The children nodded seriously, understanding that they were still very much part of the day's important events. Prince George straightened his shoulders and prepared to walk with the dignity befitting his position as second in line to the throne. He had practiced this many times, but never in circumstances quite like these, with the eyes of the world watching and history being made with every step. Princess Charlotte checked her dress one final time and prepared to follow her parents and brother with the grace she had been taught since early childhood. The processional music began, signaling that it was time for the royal family and other dignitaries to begin their formal exit from Westminster Abbey. The Wales family rose from their seats with quiet dignity, ready to play their part in the continued celebration of King Charles III's coronation. They would soon step back into the London sunshine, where thousands of people waited to see them and share in the joy of this historic day. As they prepared to leave their seats, the Wales family took one last look around Westminster Abbey, knowing they had just witnessed something truly extraordinary. The ancient church had once again served as the backdrop for a moment that would be remembered for centuries to come, and they had been honored to play their part in this magnificent ceremony. The recessional was beginning, and it was time for the Wales family to continue their role in this historic day, walking with dignity and purpose toward the doors of Westminster Abbey and the continuation of the coronation celebrations that awaited them outside. The great doors of Westminster Abbey opened to reveal a transformed London, where thousands upon thousands of people had gathered to catch their first glimpse of King Charles III wearing his crown. The Wales family stepped out into the bright, afternoon sunlight, immediately feeling the energy and excitement of the massive crowds that lined every inch of the processional route back to Buckingham Palace. The roar of celebration that greeted them was unlike anything they had experienced before, even as members of the royal family who were accustomed to public attention. Catherine Wales paused for a moment at the threshold, taking in the incredible scene before them. The streets were packed with people waving British flags, wearing patriotic colors, and holding signs celebrating the new king. Families had traveled from across the United Kingdom and beyond to be part of this historic day, and their enthusiasm was infectious. She could see children sitting on their parents' shoulders, elderly people who remembered previous royal ceremonies, and visitors from around the world who had come to witness this moment in British history. The newly crowned King Charles III emerged from Westminster Abbey wearing the imperial state crown, the lighter and more comfortable crown used for the procession back to Buckingham Palace. The St. Edward's crown used for the coronation ceremony was too heavy for the long journey through London, but the imperial state crown was no less magnificent, sparkling with precious stones and catching the sunlight in a way that made it visible, even to the people standing far from the processional route. Prince George walked with careful steps as they made their way toward the golden state coach that would carry King Charles III through the streets of London. The young prince understood that every movement he made would be photographed and remembered, and he was determined to represent his family and his future role with dignity. The weight of being second in line to the throne had become more real to him during the ceremony, but he faced it with the courage and composure that had been carefully cultivated through years of royal training. Princess Charlotte waved at the crowds with natural warmth, her genuine smile bringing joy to the faces of the people who had waited hours to see the royal family. Her 8-year-old enthusiasm was perfectly balanced with the proper behavior expected of a young princess, and she seemed to instinctively understand how to connect with the public while maintaining royal protocol. Her presence added a touch of youthful energy to the solemnity of the occasion. Prince Louis, still young enough to be amazed by all the pageantry, pointed excitedly at the magnificent horses that would pull the coronation coach. The sight of these beautiful animals, trained specifically for royal ceremonies and decorated with ceremonial gear, captured his imagination completely. His parents guided him gently, helping him maintain appropriate behavior while still allowing him to experience the wonder and excitement that such a young child naturally felt at such a spectacular event. The Golden State Coach stood waiting, its ornate decorations gleaming in the sunlight, and its interior prepared for the newly crowned King and Queen Camilla. This historic vehicle had carried British monarchs for generations, and today it would add King Charles III to the distinguished list of royals who had ridden in it during their most important ceremonies. The Wales family would follow in their own vehicles, part of the magnificent procession that would wind through central London. As they approached their own ceremonial carriage, William Wales helped his children settle into their seats, while Catherine made sure everyone was comfortable for the journey ahead. The route to Buckingham Palace would take them through some of London's most historic streets, past landmarks that had witnessed centuries of British history, and through crowds of people who represented the modern, diverse nation that King Charles III would now lead. The procession began to move with stately dignity, the pace carefully calculated to allow the maximum number of people to see their new king while maintaining the formal atmosphere appropriate to such a significant occasion. The Wales family waved at the crowds from their carriage, each member understanding their role in acknowledging the people who had come to celebrate this historic day. The route took them past some of London's most famous landmarks, each one decorated, with flags and banners celebrating the coronation. Trafalgar Square was packed with people, while the Mall stretched ahead of them like a river of red, white, and blue, with Union Jack flags waving as far as the eye could see. The sight was breathtaking and moving, a visual representation of the support and affection the British people felt for their royal family and their new king. As they traveled through the streets of London, the Wales family could see the incredible diversity of the crowds who had come to witness this moment. People of all ages and backgrounds had gathered to share in the celebration, united by their connection to the country and the institution of the monarchy. It was a powerful reminder of the role the royal family played in bringing people together and providing a sense of continuity and stability in an ever-changing world. The journey concluded as they approached the gates of Buckingham Palace, where even more crowds had gathered in hopes of seeing the royal family appear on the famous balcony. The palace, decorated magnificently for the occasion, stood ready to welcome its newly crowned king and serve as the backdrop for the final public moments of this extraordinary day. As their carriage passed through the palace gates, the Wales family knew that their public duties for the coronation were nearly complete, but the memories they had made would last forever. They had witnessed history being made, played their part in one of the most significant ceremonies in British royal tradition, and helped their children understand their place in the continuing story of the monarchy. The crowds outside Buckingham Palace continued to cheer and wave their flags, waiting for the traditional balcony appearance that would mark the formal conclusion of the coronation celebrations. The Wales family entered the palace through the private entrance, their hearts still racing from the incredible energy of the crowds and the magnitude of what they had just witnessed and participated in. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere was one of quiet celebration and reflection. The Wales family gathered in one of the palace's elegant reception rooms, taking a few moments to process the extraordinary day they had just experienced. Catherine Wales helped Prince Louis remove his formal jacket, knowing the young boy was tired from the long ceremony and procession, while Prince George and Princess Charlotte talked excitedly about their favorite moments from the day. William Wales stood quietly for a moment, looking out the palace windows at the thousands of people still gathered in the courtyard below. His father was now king, which meant his own role had fundamentally changed. He was no longer simply the heir to the throne. He was now the heir, apparent to a reigning monarch, first in line to inherit the crown that had just been placed on his father's head. The weight of that responsibility felt both familiar and completely new. The palace staff moved efficiently to prepare for the balcony appearance, ensuring that the newly crowned King Charles III and his family would be ready for their final public moment of the day. The traditional balcony appearance at Buckingham Palace was a cherished part of royal celebrations, allowing the crowds who had gathered throughout the day to see their monarchs one final time and share in the joy of the historic occasion. The time approached for the balcony appearance. The Wales family made their final preparations. Catherine checked her children's appearance one last time, smoothing Charlotte's hair and ensuring Louis's outfit was still neat, despite the long day. The children were tired but still excited, understanding that they were about to step onto one of the most famous balconies in the world and wave to thousands of people who had waited patiently to see them. The moment arrived when the palace doors opened onto the famous balcony, and King Charles III, wearing his crown and carrying himself with the dignity of his new position, stepped out to greet his subjects. The roar from the crowd below was deafening, a sound of pure joy and celebration that seemed to shake the very foundations of Buckingham Palace. The Wales family followed, taking their positions on the balcony with practiced ease. Prince George stood tall beside his parents, waving to the crowd with the composure expected of a future king. Princess Charlotte's genuine smile lit up her face as she saw the sea of people below, while Prince Louis looked around in wonder at the incredible sight of so many people gathered to celebrate his grandfather's coronation. The balcony appearance was brief but powerful, a final connection between the royal family and the people they served. As they waved to the crowds below, the Wales family reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From the careful preparations at Kensington Palace that morning, through the magnificent ceremony at Westminster Abbey, to the triumphant procession through London streets, they had been part of something truly historic. They had witnessed the peaceful transition of power that defined the British constitutional monarchy, and they had played their part with grace and dignity. The day had been long and demanding, especially for the children, but it had also been filled with moments of wonder, pride, and connection to both their family, her